Thank you, Mr. Romet, for your presentation here at America's Aerospace Summit. On a special note, this morning's coffee break is sponsored by Interleague Construction and the host hotel, Sheraton Puerto Rico Convention Center Hotel and Casino. I'm pleased to call Dr. Kenneth Byrnes, who will address to our audience on quantifying the airline pilot shortage and understanding the motivations of the FAA certified commercial and airline transport pilots. This lecture is sponsored by Seaboard Airlines. A question and answers period will be at the end of this presentation. You have no cards on your tables, so please write your questions and raise your hand at the end of the presentation, and our staff will pick them up. Dr. Kenneth Byrnes is an associate professor of aeronautical science as well as the chairman of the flight training department at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University's Daytona Beach campus. In his current role as chairman of the flight department, Dr. Byrnes is responsible for leading over 1,000 flight students, over 140 certified flight instructors, 30 A&P mechanics, and 15 additional support staff members. His academic teaching responsibilities include instructional design in aviation, aviation legislation, private pilot knowledge, and commercial pilot knowledge courses. He holds a bachelor's degree in aeronautical science, a master's degree in business administration in aviation, and a PhD in business with dual specialization in airline management and management of engineering and technology. Please welcome Dr. Kenneth Byrnes.
All right, thank you. We'll see if I can stand still. I'm used to standing still when I talk, so I'll try that today. First, I want to apologize for the title of the lecture. It was a late night, I guess, quantifying the airline pilots and motivations, and it just went on and on. So when I started to put that on the slide, there wasn't enough room. So I dumbed it down a little bit. It's just pilot supply and demand. So I'm going to talk about a topic that's pretty hot right now, especially in my world, because we are the ones feeding the airlines at my level, and my flight instructors are the ones going to these airlines, and they're going at a record rate. For the last 4 or 5 years, my turnover annually of those 140 flight instructors that were discussed is about 70%. So on an annual basis, 70% of those 140 go to a regional airline, and guess how many? I got to hire a ton more people. Last year, it was 70%. This year, it's going to be more like 80%. The motivations are increasing. So we're going to just kind of quantify that a little bit and talk a little bit about the industry in general. There are a lot of factors associated with pilot demand and that are causing the strong need in pilot demand. Of course, GDP growth, population growth, all of these things play a role. The fuel price play a role. Regulatory changes, especially for us in the US right now, all the changes that have occurred have played a very big role. Cost of training, consolidation, and the list goes on for the things that are affecting us. If we look at economic growth worldwide, you can see it's looking pretty good over the next few years here. There is no secret that Asia is booming, and that's where we see our biggest growth in aviation and actually our biggest demand for pilots right now. And this is the Boeing report broken down a little bit, but you can see the growth over the years. This is over the next 30 years, or I'm sorry, till 2034. You can see what the annual growth is by sector. And what does that mean? That means that there's a need for air travel, and that means that there's a need for pilots to fly those airplanes around. Fleet growth, no surprise, Asia is at the top of the list. And for Boeing's numbers here, they're going to represent about 38% of the new airplanes. North America is on there, they're third down, and Europe as well. But in North America and Europe, it's a bit more of a replacement scheme than it is a new aircraft scheme. There's growth in the Americas, of course, but not quite as much as there is in Asia. And this slide represents that. So you can see, of that number of aircraft, 38,000 some odd aircraft there, about 58% of that is growth. So who's going to fly these airplanes worldwide, and how are we going to meet that demand? So right now, there is a strong need for pilot trainers and people to train pilots worldwide. Some of the ways the worldwide demand is being met. Some countries hire foreign nationals, and we're seeing that in the Mideast, especially Emirates and some other airlines. They hire folks from outside of their area, and then some other places like India don't allow that. So the economic conditions and the regulatory conditions around the world are going to drive this. But we've lost a lot of folks, even from our regional workforce, to go fly for these airlines in the Middle East. So it is a worldwide competition now, where U.S. used to dominate this market, and now our pilots have options, basically worldwide. Fuel price plays an important role as well, and we all know that fuel cost is the largest cost here in the industry, and if the fuel price goes up, it's a big deal for our airlines. And as the fuel price has gone down, we have seen some expansion of some of the U.S. Airlines. Spirit's adding 30%, Southwest, plans to add 7% capacity, and some of the other ones are being a little bit hesitant at the moment. But this fuels growth as well, which means we need more pilots and more mechanics to feed that. There are competing industries as well. We had the presentation a moment ago talked a lot about the unmanned systems, and this is the largest growing degree at our school right now. We put this degree out about 2 years ago. It's already got over 250 students enrolled in it. So these students are learning to fly as well. So they're getting their pilot licenses as part of this degree program. And some of my flight instructors, instead of going to the regional airlines, are taking jobs with the U.S. Border Patrol, and also General Atomics and other contractors for the military. And they're leaving and they're making good money, and they can't compete. The regional airlines can't compete with that. So lots of changes in the U.S. in the regulatory environment. We had our Colgan accident years ago that basically sparked an outcry for an increase in safety and professionalism in the industry, and Congress acted on that, and they came up with the idea that everybody needed to have an airline transport pilot license, even the person in the right seat. So traditionally, our students can go to the regional airlines with 250 hours. This increased it to 1,500 hours. And worldwide, the rest of the world is going the other way. So while the United States increases the requirements, the rest of the world is looking into things like multi-pilot crew license and ways to get people in the cockpit faster. So that impacted us significantly. Also, part of that law that came out, there was also a new fatigue rule that came out in the United States. And this, the airlines I talked to say they had to increase staffing by 10% just so that they can fly their current schedule with that new rule in place. So we got worldwide growth, we got competing industries, we have new regulations in place, and then we have a lot of retirements as well. Boeing, the forecast calls for 558,000 pilots needed over the next 20 years, and again, most of those are in the Asia marketplace, Asia Pacific. In the U.S., we're riding a bow wave right now. The average age at Delta, I think, is 58 years old. The average age at American Airlines is a little bit older than that. So there is a bow wave of retirements approaching us in this industry. We've been talking about this for a long time and seeing it coming and talking about a pilot shortage within the United States. This slide shows that the retirements over the next 7 years for four of the big airlines here. American Airlines, 61% of its current pilots are going to retire within the next 7 years. That's huge. That's a huge number. 47% of Delta is going to retire. 40% of United. So what impact does that have, and where do they get these pilots? They get them from the regional airlines mostly. They get them from the military and the regional airlines. Now 75% of the major airline pilots in the United States come from the regional industry. And the regional industry is critical to the United States market. And these are the folks that are crunched right now for pilots. These are the ones that are already feeling the pilot shortage. What happens is if pilots are short in the regional market, the major airlines are greatly affected because it reduces their traffic flow as well. It reduces the number of people they're bringing into their hubs. And it reduces the service across the United States. The regional airlines service 607 airports, but 393 of those airports are only serviced by regional airlines. So we're bringing people from different markets into a major hub so the major airlines can fly them. This affects their bottom line. And the major airlines are starting to see this now, and they're starting to get a lot more involved in pilot shortage type activities, because it is actually starting to affect them at this point. The regional airlines, they do about 12% of the traffic within the United States. That's a pretty big number, and again, they're feeding the major airlines, and they're connecting basically the world through the hubs. But you can see the growth in the regional airlines. You know, the average length of the normal regional airline flight has increased. In 1980, I think the average length was 129 miles that a regional airline would fly. Now it's like 480 miles. So they're basically starting to travel all across the United States and longer distances and feeding the major markets for those major airlines. Pilot demand, so we'll talk about retirements. This was a study done by Mike McGee, and it's a chart taken from that study. And he had great access to a lot of data at all of the airlines. And what this shows is the predicted retirements of the majors and the regionals into the future here. And you can see it starts at about 2,000 a year, and up here, this is the red line is the major airlines. We're pushing 3,000 a year. Okay, and some forecasts say it's going to be even higher than that. So that's a significant amount of pilots year over year to lose. The regional airlines have less of a retirement issue because most of the regional airline pilots end up going to the major airlines. There are some folks that retired from the regional airlines. Most of these folks have gotten caught in low economic conditions where there wasn't a lot of movement in the industry, and they're not moving to the major airlines because they're comfortable in their current job at the regionals. You can see what the retirements look like there. They're tremendous. So where do the major airlines get their pilots from? And I said this earlier, you can see this is the demand needed for the major airlines in the United States. The green line here is minors to majors, and that's regionals to major airlines. So 75% approximately of the pilots that the majors hire are coming from the regionals. And the red line down here is the military pilots, the military output. And that's about 1,000 a year. So out of the military, they flow direct to the majors, and then the other 75% are actually coming from the regional workforce. So the regionals, they're a stepping stone. They're a stepping stone for pilots because their motivation is to be a major airline pilot. At least 90% of them are. So what does this mean? This basically means that the regional workforce, if you look at the number of pilots working for the major airlines and major cargo, if we include them, it's about 70,000 pilots. And if you look at the regional workforce, it's about 20,000 pilots. And if you're taking, 3,000 pilots or 2,000 pilots a year from the regional workforce, you're turning over that entire regional workforce about every 6 years, right? So what impact does that have on the regional community and the majors, because the regionals are supporting the majors? And even to drill it down a little bit further, where are they coming from the regionals? They're coming from folks like us. And in the United States, you can get all of your licenses in 250 hours, but you have to have 1,000 or 1,500 hours, depending on where you went to school, in order to qualify for the airline transport pilot license that is now required. So 90% of those folks do flight training. They become flight instructors. So the regional workforce pulls from the flight instructor workforce, and when that hose starts to pull, who's training the next generation of pilots? This is a problem that we've been having for 5 years, maintaining our CFI staff, maintaining the quality of our staff, because there's heavy turnover. Just like the regional workforce is a transient workforce, so is the CFIs. There's very few career flight instructors out there. There's about 100,000 flight instructors in the United States, of which only 13% are actively teaching. Because if you get a flight instructor certificate, you don't want to lose it, so you keep renewing it. But you're working for a major airline, or you're not going to go to a flight school and flight instruct, right? So 13,000 active flight instructors in the United States, and 90% of them are transient. At 250, 300 hours, they get their flight instructor certificate and they start to teach a brand new pilot. At 1,000 hours, they're in the right seat of the cockpit of a regional airline. So this is the challenge that we're facing. It goes all the way down to that level, to the training level. There is a reduction in supply. If we look since 1980, the number of student pilot certificates issued in the United States has decreased 40%. And that's attributed to lots of things, mostly cost, but also the industry itself. Think about what the industry was like pre-1978, when we pre-deregulation. And honestly, the airline industry was pretty volatile in the 1980s, and through the 1990s, and other events have continued that. So the industry itself is fairly stable and growing now, but the outlook on it all of these years has been a difficult one for us to motivate people to join, and there's less motivation. And you can see, this is actually some data, it's a little bit dated here, but this is some data of the people that we accepted to Embry-Riddle over the last 10 years, from 2002 to 2011, that actually showed up. So of the folks we would accept, we used to get 45%, now it's more like 35%. Why is that? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. A large number of these students never join the workforce because they have received low return on investment. They look at the starting salary and they say, whoa, I'm gonna spend how much to get this education? And then make how much when I get out there? And I may get a job. If you look at the industry, it's basically a lottery. We say, come join this wonderful industry, it's great, you're gonna enjoy it, it's like, you have a romance with the sky, and that's why people join the industry, right? We all have a passion for it. And then we say, do all this training, spend all this money, and maybe you'll get a job. And then maybe you'll get a job at a regional. And then maybe you'll get a job at a major. And maybe you'll advance in your career. There's a lot of maybes in there, okay? And we have to work together to get these maybes out in order to get more people in. And we've been doing that lately because of the supply and demand that's taking place here. So of the people that show up at Embry-Riddle, only 65% actually finish. So they have a change of heart, they realize, oh, this is too expensive. That's usually what they'll say. To do flight training on top of college tuition. I don't have a passion for it. This is too much work. We get that a lot. You think that flying is going to be all fun, but it's actually labor intensive to learn. So 65% of the class never completes the class. So, and they'll cite the cost of training, of course. And our numbers are consistent. UND did a study, the University of North Dakota did a study a few years ago, that of the people who stay, of that 65% who are finishing their airline pilot training in a 4-year degree, 35% are second guessing when they get done with it if they want to actually join the workforce. So these numbers, don't bode well for us folks who are really dying on the vine looking for pilots. This is a study I did about 4 years ago, and it took a current snapshot of the pilot pay. The pilot pay issue. The first 2 years here are working as a CFI. It takes about 2 years to get the experience that you need to get hired by an airline. So my CFIs, this is average, so people would make between $20,000 and $45,000 a year, but the average of them is somewhere around 25. You can see they take a pay cut to go to the regional airlines. Now this was a few years ago. And then, if they got that job, and if the industry was moving, they would get upgraded, okay, and maybe become a captain, and you can see, spend about 7 or 8 years with regional airlines, then they would have to take a pay cut to go to the majors. And then, they would get their normal upgrades, this is assuming, right? Their salary would increase basically exponentially year over year. So, and this is where they all want to be, right? But this is where they don't want to be. And this is what the parents, I can't tell you how many discussions I have with parents, because we do more than aviation flight training. We do business, we do engineering, we do all sorts of things at Embry-Riddle. And the first day of orientation, I always have a parent or two in my office saying, well, this is Johnny, he really wants to fly, but we're talking him into business because we don't think it's a good decision. Johnny wants to fly. Well, Johnny doesn't fly because mom and dad don't want to pay for it. They don't think the return on investment is there. And guess what? He never joins the workforce. So those are the kinds of things we need to fix as an industry. The blue line there happens to be aeronautical engineers, and that's the Bureau of Labor and Statistics data there, year over year. So you start higher, but it's more of a normal increase. And this is more what's expected. And if we looked at the net present value numbers back when we did this, it would take about 22 years for the pilot to catch up to the aeronautical engineer. So, this is more current. And actually, this is even dated. Because, okay, the pay is still the same for the entry CFI, but now the pay for the regional airlines is going up. And you can see the majors here. This is a longer time frame as well. That was up 27 years. This is the whole career, basically, career earnings of a pilot. If they follow, or if the industry is moving, which it plans to be for the next 15 years, if they accelerate, if they get their normal upgrades. And this is a current snapshot of the salary, the average salary at those years of experience. So we all know that's going to go up, right? So all the contracts, 5% increases, whatever. So it's actually better than this. And this is a story we have to tell our students. That yeah, when you start, the pay isn't that good. Okay, but it gets better pretty quick. Things are getting better in this industry. Republic Airways 2 days ago announced a $40 an hour starting wage. That's a new benchmark. About 2 years ago, the average was what, $22 an hour? Now we're up to $40 an hour. Supply and demand has taken effect. Regional airlines are scrambling to find pilots, and pay is going up. Starting pay is going up, and is motivating folks to join the industry who before chose not to. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So if we look at the number of pilots in the United States to feed the airlines, there's a ton of them. And this is from the GAO study that was done a few years ago, using their numbers of pilots who are under 65 years old that have an airline transport pilot certificate or a commercial certificate. And we made the assumption that if you have a commercial certificate, you have the option to work for the airlines. Yeah, you may be billed in time, but you have the option to work for the airlines. Total, there's 242,500 certified pilots that are qualified to work in the airline industry in this country. That was pretty interesting. So we have a pilot shortage. And that's what we've been saying for a long time. There is a pilot shortage. And I'm feeling it. I lost 15 people last week to the regional airline workforce. That's 10% of my workforce last week. You know, and it's turning over and over. So we have 242,500 pilots. The major airlines employ about 70,000 pilots. The regional airlines employ 20,000 pilots. That means that there's 152,000 some odd pilots out there that are available to fly. So do we have a pilot shortage? The numbers don't say that we have a pilot shortage. And the GAO study said it's inconclusive. It looks like there's enough. And the FAA says we don't have a pilot shortage. We got people that don't want to work as an airline pilot shortage. Right? That's what we're experiencing right now. So I wanted to quantify this a little bit because I'm one of those 158,500. You know, when the decision was, when I was born, basically, I thought, I want to fly an airplane. I want to be a commercial pilot, right, from day one. And then somewhere along the line, that changed. It became unrealistic for me to join the ranks. And it did have to do with pay. There was no way I could go with a family and other commitments to earn that level of income. So we wanted to quantify that a little bit and sent a whole bunch of surveys out. I'm going to talk a little bit about that study that we did. First, we know we needed 1,750 folks to answer this survey, and we assumed we would get a 5% response rate, so I had to send 35,000 surveys out, because the FAA doesn't have a database for emails, right? So I had to send it to their home addresses, and it was pretty interesting, but we randomly selected them. We sent postcards. We had 1,950 responses. This stuff's not that important. Some of them were older than the minimum age, so we got rid of them. We didn't really care what they had to say because they couldn't join the industry. Some other folks didn't quite answer the question, but the final sample was 1,736, which leads me to the important part. All the data I'm about to show you, statistically, is 99% confident, plus or minus 3.09%. So if I give you a percentage and say 70% of people say this, so we are 99% confident that 70% plus or minus 3% of the total population, that 242,000 pilots that are out there, feel that same way. So pretty powerful data. The demographics, the responses we got, the majority of them were ATPs. The blue here, we did get some commercial pilots, but 75% of it was ATPs. The age spread was pretty good. You would expect, you know, they don't really start to get these certificates or ratings, especially ATP, until you're age 23. So this makes sense. And I don't know why I got an issue there. I'll have to fix that. But this was kind of selfish. I wanted to know where they did their training and what type of training they did. So we have, you know, university training in conjunction with a bachelor's degree. And this is the way that the United States is kind of going and forcing the pilot population right now, because they get extra benefits. They can get to the airlines 500 hours in less time if they go to a university and take an approved aviation degree. Flight training academies, Part 61, so that's unstructured type of training. So we wanted to know who did this kind of training. And there was a clear trend when we correlated this with age. I'll get the fluff out of there. The trend is, if you look at the blue line here, this is the Part 61 unstructured type training. So as the population got younger, or gets younger, they're doing less unstructured training. And as it gets younger, they're doing more 4-year university training. And this is, again, where the industry is going. The industry in the United States wants an education, and now they're rewarding it. The FAA is rewarding it by having that 1,500 hours reduced to 1,000. So it's a little bit different philosophy. You know, in the early 1900s, if you wanted to be a doctor, you could go to Johns Hopkins and study for 7 years, or you could go to Joe's doctor school and study for 2 weeks, right? And at the end, you would still be a doctor. We're kind of going that way in aviation in the United States right now. You know, where instead of going to Joe's FBO to become a professional pilot, we're kind of going more structured education. So we're getting out of the training business and more into the education business, 4-year. So of the group, this is the important stuff. I asked, is flying your primary occupation? And 70% said yes. That means of the total population, of the 242,000 pilots out there, there are approximately 72,000 pilots who are certified to work in the airlines who don't work in the airlines. They choose not to. For some reason, they're no longer working as a pilot. And then the ones that are working in the industry, this is the job they were doing, the Part 91, 135, so this is corporate aviation, air taxi. And then you can see down here, this is the airlines, regionals, and majors, and the flight instructors. Even some unmanned pilots up here, about 1%, 1.7% of the pilots who are certified took those unmanned jobs, and we expect that to grow as well. Some pilots international, they've gone international. So, and then we asked, okay, or I asked, which statement best describes you? And then I'll choose one answer. And I do not intend to work as an airline pilot was the #1 response. 55.2% of the pilots that responded do not intend to work as an airline pilot. Some of them seek to work as an airline pilot once they get the minimums. 1 or 2, 3% plan to work internationally or are working internationally, and 29% that were already working for the airlines. So 55%, that's a big number. The results show with 99% confidence, again, the results show that between 130,000 and 138,000 pilots out there that don't want to work for the airlines. So is there a pilot shortage? Not really, okay? There's a pilot shortage of folks who are wanting to enter the airline industry. When asked why, they can answer more than one question here, but when asked why, the #1 reason the pay is not sufficient. The #2 reason, it will create an undesirable lifestyle. So pay and lifestyle were the number 1 and 2 responses as to why they did not want to join this industry. Is pay an issue that has kept you from joining the airline workforce? And this is only that 55% that said they didn't want to join. So of that 55%, 82% said pay was the issue. Lifestyle, 52% said lifestyle was also an issue. Okay, so there are concerns there, keeping them out. And then this is a very interesting one. So we asked randomly throughout the survey, a question will pop up and say, would you leave your current position for a job at a regional airline earning $25,000 to $30,000 a year, yes or no? And then later on another question, would you leave your current job for $40,000 to $45,000, yes or no? So we were identifying what the sweet spot was for folks to jump ship as to what they were doing and join the airline workforce. And you can see as the pay goes up, the people who are currently not seeking airline employment, but are certified to fly for the airlines, as the pay goes up, they will change their mind. So this is pure statistical data here, and the interesting point is here, 40 to 45,000. So a pay range of 40 to 45,000 will double the regional airline pilot workforce if they all make it to training, if they all actually show up for training, right? So this, the money is going to talk. People are going to come to the industry if the pay is increased. That's what the data shows. And then asking what the motivation was for those who said they want to work internationally. Those that said, I'm not interested in the United States at all. I want to work for a foreign carrier. You can see it costs a little bit more money for them to join the workforce. Okay, at 40 to 45K. So if we total it up, my salary here, and we look at what will motivate people to want to join, doesn't mean they can't join, right? Motivate people to want to join, or at least fill out an application, there's a large number that will actually move. This is everybody, not just those who plan to not work in the industry. It includes those who said they want to work in the industry. And then where do they come from? And this is what I'm starting to see now. So up here, this orange is the CFI population. Flight instructor population, there's a small population, about 1% to 2% of that 13,000 that are really permanent flight instructors. You know, and what's going to motivate them to change their mind? It is money. And last week I saw that firsthand. Republic Airways came on my ramp with a brand new Embraer 175, did interviews in the back. It's 2 weeks old. There wasn't even any head prints on the glass for passengers or anything like that. Smelled brand new, beautiful airplane. Pilots went in, they saw it. Potential students saw it. We had our open house that week, so we're motivating people to see what the airline industry is like. And I lost 3 of my most senior instructors who would never, I'm talking they've been working for Embry-Riddle for 12 years, 13 years. Okay, and they decided that $40 an hour was finally enough for them to make the jump to the airline industry. So it basically brings home this data and says that yes, as the salary goes up, people are going to move. Motivation of pilots, only the pilots who aren't working. So this 30% who aren't working as a pilot, you can see, again, more of them will choose to join the industry. However, the industry will tell you that only about 30 or 40% of them can actually pass new hire training. When you're out of the industry for a while and you try to get back in, it is pretty tough. So what are airlines having to do? Extend training footprints, extra training. Where years ago they wouldn't. They would just release somebody, now they're giving more training, okay, because they are that desperate for pilots. So along the same lines, I did a quick survey of my instructors to see kind of what they were thinking, you know, because we have the major airlines, the regional airline pilots, we have our CFIs, and then we have our students, and then we have our soon-to-be students, right? But what's motivating our CFIs? And first of all, I asked them, I said, when did you first know you wanted to be a pilot? 38% said before elementary school. Before elementary school. And 15% said in elementary school. So over half of the pilots know what they want to do. So it's a very passion-driven industry. So we have folks that want to join this industry. We just have to reward it in order to get them and motivate them to stay in it or join it in the first place. Of all the instructors, 90% plan to seek a job at a regional airline. 10% said, nope, I'm either okay here or I plan to go corporate. The ultimate career goal, 86% major airline. Some of them major cargo, 5% was major cargo. Only 1%, their ultimate goal was to be a regional airline pilot. All right, so the regionals are a stepping stone, just like the CFI ranks are a stepping stone. How long do they plan to stay at the regionals? Well, they had different thoughts on this, but about 2 to 3 years was the average. Some of them, 71%, plan to work with or plan to interview with more than one regional airline and pick the best option. I have students right now, we have agreements with almost all regional airlines, and I have students that are in every single agreement. They're in the JetBlue Cape Air agreement, they're in the SkyWest agreement, they're in all of them. And I ask, why are you in all of these agreements? Well, I want to see which one is best. Right? So where are they going to go? It's a pilot market right now. When asked, when they're ranking the importance of a potential employer, the number one thing that they put on the list was salary. They said salary is most important when I'm looking at the airline that I want to work for, and then domicile locations because of the cost of living. They're coming out of the university with a lot of debt. They want to move home with mom and dad for a few years while they don't make a lot of money. Okay, so domicile is very important as well. Then specifically ask them, okay, what airline do you want to go to? 5%, only 5% didn't know. Only 5% said, I don't know. You know, the rest of them, the majority wanted SkyWest. At the time, SkyWest was the highest paying airline. So that was pretty interesting because SkyWest is a Western company in the United States, and about 85% of my folks are from the eastern side of the United States. So I was surprised by this. Why are you going to SkyWest? Well, a lot of reasons came up. Domicile locations, when I asked them specifically, why did you choose this airline or that airline, they said, well, domicile location was the number one. So that goes down to the cost of living. Upgrade time was number 2, and salary was number 3 for the specific airlines they were doing. And if you look down here, travel benefits, signing bonuses, recommended by somebody, upgrade time, annual bonus program, that's the Endeavor program, it's not really motivating them that much. This one wasn't an option. I didn't have an option to say, do you want to go to an airline because of the corporate culture? I had an other that they could fill in. They told me that corporate culture was important. Okay, and that's pretty unique. That's something I wasn't expecting. So we have all these agreements, and they're doing stuff with these airlines, internships and kind of in-dock training, new hire training. They observe them, and they are looking at the company and deciding whether or not they want to join that company. So it's a little bit different than years past. So some of the discussion points, the airlines worldwide, we're going to grow. They're going to grow. And they're going to need pilots, and they're going to need mechanics. Non-US airlines, they may focus on more of a minimum training solution for pilots, and I don't mean that in a bad way. The old Part 61 way that we used to train, and I get this every day, I get a call from somewhere outside the United States that says, we want you to train our pilots. We want to contract with your company and train our pilots. We want them done from 0 to hero in a year, and then we want them back home in the right seat of the Airbus. Right? That's what they're looking for. They want to fill the seats. They have to fill the seats. They're not replacing pilots either. They're starting basically from the ground up. So some of the things they're doing is 1 to 2 year ab initio schools, or the MPL license, the multi-pilot crew license. So the rest of the world is doing that, while the United States is saying, no, 250 hours is not enough experience, you need 1,500 hours. So we're going to the education route rather than the training route. So non-US airlines may, and they already have, focused on hiring foreign nationals if able, and we've seen that happen. US airlines, they require the higher flight time, and they focus on more of a degree education. And we're going to have a lot of pilot retirements over the next 15 to 20 years, a ton of them. So we're basically going to recycle the entire workforce, or almost the entire workforce. So it now is a great time to enter this career field. Absolutely. A great time. So the US major airlines rely on regional pilots. That's where they get about 75% of their pilots, and they get about 25% from the military. And between 10 and 15% of the regional pilot workforce is going to flow to the majors each year. So the turnover for them is going to be tremendous. What does this do to their training footprint and their availability for simulators? All right, and their availability to schedule with the major airlines, or to even expand. So they will face a pilot hiring shortage, and I say that, they already have. I mean, every airline I talk to is dying for pilots. Okay, they want a class of 40, but only they get 20. You know, and so it's already happening, and it has been happening for a few years. So the regional airlines will increase the starting salaries. We've seen this, we've seen bonuses, we've seen all sorts of programs now. The $40 an hour to $36 an hour. Endeavor with their $80,000 bonus paid over 4 years, so $20,000 in bonus a year over 4 years to attract pilots. Flow through with majors, so taking the lottery out of the career field and kind of partnering with the major airlines and giving a roadmap. And then they're partnering with folks like us to bring that roadmap even further. Instead of hiring our graduates and looking at our graduates, these companies are now looking at our sophomores and juniors. And they're trying to earmark them as future employees. Right? So that is a sign of what is going on in the industry. The regional airline hire footprint may be extended. The ones I talked to say it is extended. So they're doing extra training events, okay, with the new requirement of the ATP course that the FAA put in place that requires a full motion simulator. That's a 2-week extension. They have to give every student or every new hire that as well, unless they came from Embry-Riddle, because we teach that in our curriculum. Increasing salary may create more motivation for people to stay in the industry and to join the industry before they get into the industry. So retention of flight students, that's 65% retention. We've seen that go up over the past few years, from 60 to 61. When the industry is booming, our student retention rate goes up. Training organizations will face significant turnover. This is cutting off the supply, the total supply. So if the regional airlines don't start coordinating hire dates and stuff like that with folks like us, and right now I have 57 students of the 1,100 who aren't flying because I don't have a flight instructor for them. And I haven't stopped hiring people in the last 5 years, so it's an interesting time. Simulation training centers also will be at near capacity. They already are, and we talked to them because all of the new hire training requires full motion simulation. These places are packed right now. So a lot of information in a kind of short amount of time frame, but I am open to questions. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Yeah, obviously you put a lot of effort on the salary, and under benefits is not addressed at all. Is that a particular reason, or do you think
Benefits was asked in there in that second study that I did, let's see right here. So travel benefits, retirement benefits, medical benefits, they didn't rank as high. And I have the same issue because at Embry-Riddle they get great benefits. They get free tuition, medical, retirement, all the things that no other training provider can give them. And these kids are 22 years old. They're looking for a shiny jet is what they're looking for. Yeah.
Lori Garber left NASA a couple of years ago now. Does she join the Airline Pilots Association? Anything that's coming out of all that, or involvement in that, any changes, any guidelines?
You're talking about the Airline Pilots Association in the United States. Well, they've been saying all along it's not a pilot shortage, it's a pay shortage. This kind of quantifies that for them. Yeah, they like me. Because I was telling them, no, it's not pay shortage. And then I did the research and found out that I was wrong too. Any other questions? All right. Yes, sir.
Will you make a copy of your presentation available?
Yes, we'll do that. Absolutely. Yes. They're looking at about $200,000. Absolutely. And about 60,000 of that, so actually they're going through CFI, 70,000 of that is flight training costs. But the tuition at Embry-Riddle is a private university, just like any other university. But want the best, we're the best, we're for the best. But yeah, our students are serious about what they're doing. They're serious about this industry because they're getting the best education in the world. But they're also paying for that education, absolutely. But our numbers are consistent with every other flight training provider in the world, or in the country, I should say. And if you look, adding to that, our students can get financial aid, right? The financial aid or the loan system for people going to aviation academies or Part 61 schools went away when the market tanked. And if you look at other training providers that aren't connected to a four-year degree, they don't get financial aid, you're going to see that 90% of their student population are international students. They're living off of international contracts for the Chinese and everywhere. In order to stay open. But there's no funding opportunity for just that training side that we talked about. The funding is available for the four-year education. Yes. That doesn't. So for us, our number of international enrollments hasn't really changed. We're about 18%. And we draw from places like Saudi Arabia and South Korea and those folks, and they have value in the education, the education. For those other providers, they are doing the 1 to 1.5 year, give them the basic minimums, get them the certificates or ratings, and get them back home to where they go. But the data I showed here is U.S. citizens. Yeah. Yes. Flight security or risk of flying, that's what we do day in and day out. The safety of my department is the #1 commercial that I have to bring students in. But, so we risk assess absolutely everything. And one of the reasons why our pilots are so good is because we give them that safety culture that they kind of have inherent to them when they leave and they go out into the industry. You know, for us, risk is always an issue because where we train is the busiest training environment in the country. 20% of the training that occurs happens in our airspace. So risk is a big deal, but we mitigate that risk significantly. We haven't had any real accidents to talk about in about 20 years. And in that time, by the way, we've flown almost 1 million flight hours. So the risk is absolutely security. You know, initially after 9/11, we saw that international number go down, of course, because it was harder to get in the United States to flight training, but now it's back stable, about 18%. It takes the students a few weeks to get TSA cleared and get them for training, but it really hasn't been an issue. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
It sounds like an interesting question. I'm just curious. How advanced is the idea, if at all, in the development industry about alternative pilots? Say, drone type piloting, water pilot, Google car type stuff? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so how close are we to getting the pilot out of the cockpit? I don't think we're close. I mean, I think it can be done, and I know it can be done. We talked about that earlier. You know, right now we have a little more unmanned systems. It means there's still a pilot. And when we go to more of the drones, you know, where it's more not pilot initiated, the trust factor with the traveling public, I think, is an issue. Even the trust factor on this is what I've heard, right? So I don't know about you, but when I'm flying an airplane, I care a lot more about the safety of that airplane because I'm in it. Right? If I'm on the ground and flying it, it's a whole different mental dynamic that we're just starting to learn to understand. You know, the human factors associated with flying unmanned systems is a lot different than it is being in the actual airplane. So a lot more research has to be done in that area, but I don't think we're close. Yeah, and we're doing it. Our engineering folks, you know, we're working on it as well.
Where we stand, that happening in the cargo.
Yep. Yeah, and it may come in phases. So instead of a first officer, you got a guy on the ground who has a satellite link. You know, you still have a captain in the airplane, maybe it phases in. Do we think that's going to happen? We really don't. The demands. I mean, hell, ADS-B is required for 2020, and Boeing really hasn't even started installing us on their new deliveries. You know, so if we can't even get ADS-B in an airplane within 15 years, how are we going to make this change? So I don't see it in the near future. All right. Thank you all. I appreciate it.